So today we are hearing Canto 3, Chapter 24, text number 16. And it says, O Kardama, I know that the original Supreme Personality of Godhead has now appeared as an incarnation by his internal energy. He is the bestower of all desired by the, he is the bestower of all desired by the living entities. And he has now assumed the body of Kapila Muni. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, we find the words Purusham Avakirnam Sva Mayaya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is everlastingly, eternally the form of Purusha, the predominator or enjoyer. And when he appears, he never accepts anything of this material energy. The spiritual world is a manifestation of his personal internal potency, whereas the material world is a manifestation of his material or differentiated energy. The word sva mayaya, by his own internal potency, indicates that whenever the Supreme Personality of Godhead descends, he comes in his own energy. He may assume the body of a human being, but that body is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, it is clearly stated that only fools and rascals, mudhas, consider the body of Krishna to be the body of a common human being. The word Sevadim means that he is the original bestower of all the necessities of life upon the living entities. In the Vedas also, it is stated that he is the chief living entity and that he bestows all the desired necessities of life, all the desired necessities of other living entities. Because he is the bestower of the necessities of all others, he is called God. The Supreme is also a living entity. He is not impersonal. As we are individual, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also individual, but he is the supreme individual. That is the difference between God and the ordinary living entity. Haribol. Okay, so that is Canto 3, Chapter 24, Text 16. Let me just read what that verse says again. O Kardama, I know that the original Supreme Personality of Godhead has now appeared as an incarnation by his internal energy. He is the bestower of all desired by the living entities, and he has now assumed the body of Kapila Muni. Haribol. Okay, so when there is a incarnation of the Supreme Personality Godhead, and of course, he can appear in any form he wants, and there's no limitations on his form or abilities, activities, etc. That's why it says, O Kardama, I know that the original Supreme Personality of Godhead has now appeared as an incarnation of his internal energy. He is the bestower of all desired by the living entities. And he has now assumed the body of Kapila Muni. Okay, so in this purport it says, when he appears, he never accepts anything of this material energy. In other words, he's self-sufficient. The Lord is self-sufficient, and he is not in any way dependent on the material energy. The spiritual world is a manifestation of his personal internal potency, whereas the material world is a manifestation of his material or differentiated energy. The word swamayaya, by his own internal potency, indicates that whenever the Supreme Personality of Godhead descends, he comes in his own energy. He may assume the body of a human being, but that body is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, it is clearly stated that only fools and rascals, mudhas, consider the body of Krishna to be the body of a common human being. The word sevadim, means that he is the original bestower of all the necessities of life upon the living entities. In the Vedas also, it is stated that he is the chief a chief living entity, and that he bestows all the desired necessities of other living entities. Because he is the bestower of the necessities of all others, he is called God. The Supreme is also a living entity. He is not impersonal. As we are indebted, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also individual, but he is the supreme individual. That is the difference between God and the ordinary living entity. Okay. Uh, so now the Kardama Muni uh, has been blessed. Kardama Muni and his wife have been blessed with the appearance of Kapila Muni, the incarnation of the Lord. So that means that they are very, very uh, spiritually advanced devotees in order to have the Supreme Personality Godhead as their child. Text number 17. What?
One question here.
Yeah.
When he appears, he never accepts anything of this material energy. Is it because, like, he also says patram pushpam palam toyam yome prayachati? So that means, like, even though those are material objects, but they become spiritualized because of the bhakti.
The body of the Lord is completely transcendental, so he doesn't need anything material. Um, he has his body is spiritual, so it's not part of the material nature.
Correct. But the word here is like he never accepts anything that is material.
He doesn't need anything material. He has a spiritual body. When he appears, he never accepts anything of the material energy. The spiritual world is a manifestation of his personal internal potency, whereas the material world is a manifestation of his material or differentiated energy. Yes, there's nothing material about his body, his activities, etc.
The verse then Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yume Bhaktya Prayachita, that verse basically says that I'll accept if you offer these things with love and devotion. So there also he uses the word accepts. So I'm just trying to understand, like, because here he won't accept anything of material energy. Does that mean like when we offer with devotion, it essentially becomes spiritual, whatever we end up offering? Then only he can accept.
Correct. Um, it says, O Kardam, I know that the original Supreme Personality of Godhead has now appeared as an incarnation by his internal energy. He is the bestower of all desired by the living entities, and he has now assumed the the body of Kapila Muni. So, I mean, he's completely independent of the material nature. He has nothing to do with the material nature. And by the way, Kapila Muni is an incarnation of Krishna. So it has nothing to do with this material world. Yeah.
When it says he appears, he never accepts anything of this material energy. Does it mean that Krishna is not accepting any material body for when he is appearing, rather than Patram? That is the offering we are doing, but here maybe the context, what I understood is when Krishna is appearing, he is not accepting any material body, anything material when he's appearing.
Hmm.
He's coming in spiritual body, not in material.
Yes.
That's what I,
Yes.
rather than what we are offering as a devotee. It's a,
What?
rather than the Patra Pushpam verse, that's separate. That's what we are offering to Lord. But here, the context is Krishna is appearing in the spiritual body, not in material body.
Yes. Yeah, it's a fact. He has nothing. He's not part of the material nature, and he doesn't take part in anything material. It's completely spiritual, and he's the bestower of necessities of all others. Therefore, he's called God. Okay, and he's not dependent on anything material. He doesn't. In fact, although he's in the material world, he's not. His body is not material. It doesn't need anything material for his maintenance. Okay, that's why it says, "O Kardama, I know that the original Supreme Personality Godhead has now appeared as an incarnation by his internal energy." So there's internal energy and there's external energy. So the external energy is material energy, internal energy is spiritual. So he has nothing, his body is not uh, made of matter, it's made of spiritual energy. Okay. Well, that's why it says, when he appears, he never accepts anything of this material energy. That's the statement. Okay. However, he's able to give everything necessary uh, for the materialistic people. So he can supply everything necessary for the material people, but he himself is completely spiritual. And says he may assume the body of a human being, but that body is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, it is clearly stated that only fools and rascals, mutas, consider the body of Krishna to be the body of a common human being. Okay, so God is a unique person. He's not, although even if he appears in this material world, he is not part of the material world. He's completely independent. Okay. Next, text 17. My mystic yoga and the practical, by mystic yoga and the practical application of knowledge from the scriptures. Kapila Muni, who is characterized by his golden hair, his eyes just like lotus petals, and his lotus feet, which bear the marks of lotus flowers, will uproot the deep-rooted desires for work in this material world. Well, the body of Kapila Muni is not in any way material. It's completely spiritual. Purport. In this verse, the activities and bodily features of Kapila Muni are very nicely described. The activities of Kapila Muni are forecast here. He will present the philosophy of Sankhya. Now, you remember we learned that there's real Sankhya and there's false Sankhya. There's the real Kapila Muni and there's the false Kapila Muni. He will present the philosophy of Sankhya in such a way that by studying his philosophy, people will be able to uproot the deep-rooted desire for karma, fruitive activities. Everyone in this material world engages in achieving the fruits of his labor. A man tries to be happy by achieving the fruits of his own honest labor, but actually he becomes more and more entangled. One cannot get out of this entanglement unless he has perfect knowledge or devotional service. Those who are trying to get out of the entanglement by speculation are also doing their best, but in the Vedic scriptures, we find that if one has taken to the devotional service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness, he can very easily uproot the deep-rooted desire for fruitive activities. Sankhya philosophy will be broadcast by Kapila Muni for that purpose. His bodily features are also described here. Jnana does not refer to ordinary research work. Jnana entails receiving knowledge from the scriptures through the spiritual master by disciplic succession. In the modern age, there is a tendency to do research by mental speculation and concoction. But the man who speculates forgets that he himself is subject to the four defects of nature. He is sure to commit mistakes. His senses are imperfect. He is sure to fall into illusion, and he is cheating. Unless one has perfect knowledge from disciplic succession, he simply puts forth some theories of his own creation. Therefore, he is cheating people. Jnana means knowledge received through the disciplic succession from the scriptures, and Vijnana means practical application of such knowledge. Kapila Muni's Sankhya system of philosophy is based on Jnana and Vijnana. Jnana means knowledge, and Vijnana is transcendental knowledge. Okay, so there's no speculation involved. That's why it says those who are trying to get out of the entanglement by speculation are also doing their best. But in the Vedic scriptures, we find that if one has taken to the devotional service of the Lord and Krishna consciousness, he can very easily uproot the deep-rooted desire for fruitive activities. All right, so today, people are engaged in ordinary research work. Yeah, Prabhupada has said you don't have to research anything. The research has already been done. You simply have to accept the conclusions of the acharyas and follow them strictly. And you save a lot of time and effort by doing that. Now, today, people like to do research and they like to invent something and then patent it so that whatever they have invented belongs to them. And then they can sell their invention or whatever it is. But you don't really need to invent anything. Everything's already perfect. You simply have to follow the instructions of the Lord. So, for example, what are exactly the greatest, let's say, inventions of human beings? Well, you might say the light bulb, because previously people were using candles when it got dark. So Edison and other people invented the light bulb so that you could have light at night in the dark and anticipate the darkness. But previous to that, there was candles. So they would light candles at night and do some homework or whatever. After now there's electricity, so people can just flip a switch and all of a sudden there's light, and they can study, they can read, they can do whatever they want. But yet, in previous time, people were getting everything done without such electricity, but they still got things done. You know, they were not, let's say, they were not in abject ignorance. So all the things that have been discovered, like Edison with his light bulb, and other things like that, maybe it's made life a little easier for human beings, but it's not indispensable. People can live without those things also, and the proof is that they did live without thousands and millions of years. Okay, so if one takes to devotional service to the Lord and Krishna consciousness, he can very easily uproot the deep-rooted desire for fruitive activities. Very significant statement. These fruitive activities, well, most people are engaged in fruitive activities. And when it says fruitive, it means that they want to enjoy the fruit themselves, and they don't want to offer the fruit to Krishna. So, however, if one takes to devotional service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness, he can very easily uproot the deep-rooted desire for fruitive activity. So but you need to have knowledge to do that. And but most children today are being educated how to achieve, their own goals of sense gratification, and not that they should dedicate their life to serving the Lord. In fact, nowadays it's getting harder. Like, for example, you have priests and you have nuns in the Catholic Church. It's harder now to get people, to get women to become nuns, and also it's harder to get people to be priests in the Catholic Church. Why don't you look that up, see if that's correct?
What
That it's harder now to convince young people to become priests or nuns. In the Catholic Church. What does
yes,
huh?
yes, it is becoming increasingly difficult to convince young people to become priests and nuns in Catholic Church, a trend that has been observed over the past few decades. Several factors contribute to this decline in religious vocations. Number one, secularization and changing social values.
Meaning sense gratification.
Mm. Declining religious commitment. In many parts of the world, especially Western societies, there has been a general decline in religious affiliation and practice. Fewer young people are actively participating in religious life, and many are distancing themselves from organized religion altogether. Cultural shifts. Modern values emphasize personal freedom, individualism, and material success, which often conflict with the sacrifices and lifelong commitment required for religious life. Lack of interest in religious life. Younger generations may view the celibate life of a priest or a nun as outdated or restrictive, making it less appealing compared to careers that offer more personal fulfillment or freedom. Then the
More personal fulfillment. I mean, more sense gratification.
And then the second bucket is that the perceptions of the Catholic Church, such as the sexual abuse scandals,
What?
because of the perception, the second bucket of reasons why people are not considering this priests or becoming nuns is because of the perceptions of the Catholic Church. Under that bucket, there's sexual abuse scandals. So the Catholic Church has been plagued by sexual abuse scandals which have tarnished its reputation and trustworthiness, especially among younger generations.
What's happening in Krishna consciousness also. It's not just the Catholic Church, even in Krishna consciousness.
This has led to significant decline in respect for clergy and reluctance to join religious orders. And then conservative doctrine. The Catholic Church's stance on issues such as contraception, LGBTQ plus rights, and gender roles is often seen as too conservative or out of touch with modern values.
Modern, modern demoniac values.
Many young people may feel alienated by the church's teachings and less inclined to dedicate their lives to its service. And then another reason is the career and life options. Because of the alternative career paths, today's young people have access to a wide range of career and life opportunities, including professions that allow them to serve others without the lifelong commitment required by the priesthood or religious orders. Marriage and family. Catholic Church requires priests and nuns to remain celibate, which can be a significant deterrent for the young people who want to experience marriage, family life, and personal relationships. And next is the demographic and geographic changes. Aging clergy. In many regions, the current clergy is aging and fewer young people are stepping in to fill those roles. This has created a significant gap in the number of priests and nuns available to serve a church. Regional variations. While vocations are declining in Western countries like United States and Europe, some parts of the world, particularly in Africa and Asia, are still seeing growth in the religious vocations due to stronger cultural ties to the church.
Yeah, many black people have taken to the becoming nuns and priests, and they end up oftentimes in Western countries filling the roles of nuns and priests that the Western people don't want to do anymore.
And then there's the modern lifestyle and distractions. Technology and social media. Modern technology and social media have created distractions that pull young people away from traditional religious vocations. Many are more focused on building online communities or pursuing careers that provide financial stability, social recognition, and freedom. Then there is the instant gratification culture. The modern world is driven by a culture of instant gratification, which is often at odds with the lifelong discipline and sacrifice and delayed rewards associated with religious vocations.
Yeah, sounds right. Mhm.
There are some efforts to address this decline. It says, despite these challenges, the Catholic Church continues to make efforts to attract young people in religious life. Initiatives include vocation retreats, offering spiritual retreats and programs designed to help young people discern their calling. Youth engagement, encouraging youth participation in church activities such as World Youth Day and local ministries to foster a deeper connection with their faith. Mentorship, providing spiritual guidance and mentorship through parish priests and religious leaders to help young people navigate their spiritual journey. Yeah. So, in summary, while there are significant challenges, the Catholic Church is also actively seeking ways to engage and inspire young generation.
Mhm.
However, the broader societal and cultural changes make this an increasingly difficult task.
Well, and you have television, you have movies, you have internet, You have so-called sexual revolution. All these things are distracting people's attention from having a uh, from being celibate and sacrificing uh, 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 self indulgence in order to engage in devotional service. So, but you'll always find some idealistic people that they say, well, no, I want to become a nun or I want to become a priest, and they go through the educational process to do that. But it's becoming more difficult to find people that want to dedicate their life to serving God. And because of all the sense gratification and nonsense going on in the world today. Yeah, there's such a thing as Sodom and uh, what is it? Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a Gomorrah. Uh, yeah, it was just it was uh, a uh, a culture that completely became materialistic, and God got so angry that it destroyed them. In the Bible. You want to look that up? Sodom and Gomorrah.
Spelling was C-B-H-A-M or C-D-D-A-M, Saddam.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gomorrah.
G-M-O-R-A.
Something like that.
Oh, yeah. Sodom, S-O-D-O-M and G-O-M-O-R-R-E-H.
Right.
The two cities mentioned in Bible are the ancient cities mentioned in the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Genesis. They were located near the Dead Sea and are famous for their sinfulness and wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
According to the biblical narrative, they were destroyed by divine judgment due to the moral depravity of their inhabitants.
Yeah, they were engaged in uncontrolled sense gratification.
So the key biblical story is the Genesis 18 to 19. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah unfolds when God reveals to Abraham that he plans to destroy the cities because of their wickedness. Abraham pleads with God to spare the cities if righteous people can be found. God agrees, but ultimately,
Didn't find any.
only Lot,
Only one
Abraham's
family.
nephew, and his family are found to be religious. Angel visits Lot. Two angels visit Lot in Sodom and warn him to flee with his family. Lot and his family are instructed to leave the city and not look back. However,
The wife looks back.
the Lot's wife disobeys and looks back, turning into pillar of salt.
Yeah.
Destruction. After Lot and his family escape, God rains down fire and brimstone, completely destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. So, symbolism and moral lessons. Judgment and morality. Sodom and Gomorrah are often symbolized as places of extreme moral degradation, with their destruction serving as a warning of the consequences of sin. Hospitality. The cities are also associated with the sin of inhospitality, as the people of Sodom are shown to have treated strangers with cruelty and violence. Divine justice. The destruction of these cities reflects the theme of divine justice, where wickedness cannot go unpunished. Cultural and religious impact. Christianity and Judaism. Sodom and Gomorrah are often referenced as examples of consequences of sin and divine retribution. In Islamic tradition, the cities are also mentioned in the Quran, where they are referred to as the people of Prophet Lot, who were punished by Allah for their transgressions.
They're what? Were there?
For their transgressions means
Yeah,
like
transgressions, there's sins. Yeah.
Apparently, Islam also refers to the same cities,
Mm-hmm.
but as Lot is considered Prophet Lot. Metaphor for sinfulness. In literature, Sodom and Gomorrah have come to symbolize the places of vice, immorality, and excessive indulgence.
Excessive what?
Indulgence.
Yes, and sense gratification.
Yeah, that's what it's.
You could say almost all the cities in the United States, it's Sodom and Gomorrah. All over the world. So there's, all this examples in ancient times, but the same thing is happening today. Of course, you have, Catholic Church and Protestant churches, and you have, Muslim uh, groups that are trying to make people all, have spiritual lives. But um, the general culture has deteriorated so much that it's harder and harder to find young people who want to dedicate their life to be nuns or priests or celibates. Celibacy is very important for spiritual life. Even if one is married, still, they have to practice celibacy. They only engage in sex to procreate children. They don't engage in sex for so-called pleasure. And if, of course, there are people that can do that, and they do that. But the modern society today is such that it's not looked upon as something that is, let's say, valuable. People are more concerned about making money and enjoying sense gratification, whereas previous times people were. There's always been sinful people, but there was more emphasis on having a pure life without sense gratification. So when Prabhupada came, and he came at the time of the hippie, let's say, culture that became very prominent throughout the United States. Free sex and free drugs and so forth. So even though so many young people were experimenting with drugs and experimenting with, people have always been, engaging in illicit sex, but it became even more, let's say, intense. And but it caused the destruction of many young people's lives. The overdosing on drugs and so forth, and dropping out from school and refusing to go into the army, and all kinds of different things were happening. In the 1960s, where young people didn't want to follow, let's say, the normal course of things that their parents went through. They wanted to have, free sex and live off of and drop out of organized society.
Mm.
And it experimented by making their own communities. Of course, all those communities failed. There might be one or two that are still existing, but all the hippie communities that popped up around in the United States, most of them failed. Once you look at the hippie communities during the 1960s, and then you had these communities where sex was mandatory. To, to be able to live in a community, you could not deny anyone sex. If they wanted to have sex, you had to engage in it. What does it
So
say?
it says the hippie communities that originated in 1960s have evolved in various ways.
Have what?
Evolved,
Evolve.
evolved in various ways, but many of their ideals, such as environmentalism, communal living, and alternative lifestyles, continue to influence modern society. While large-scale hippie movement of the 1960s, characterized by the anti-establishment protest, free love, and rejection of mainstream culture, has largely dissipated.
Yeah, free love means, you know, if you're part of the community, you have to engage in sex. You can't deny anyone. If someone comes up to you and says, "Okay, let's have some sex," you can't say no.
Hmm.
Why don't you look that up? I forget what the name was.
Several communities and cultural offshoots that from that era remain active or have transformed over time. Current state of hippie communities. Intentional communities and communes. Ongoing communes. Some of the original hippie communes established in 1960s and 70s still exist today. These intentional communities often emphasize sustainable living, shared resources, communal decision making, and alternative economic models. Famous examples include the Farm in Tennessee, Twin Oaks in Virginia. Sustainability and ecology. Many modern day communes and eco villages have integrated environmental consciousness and sustainable practices, which are rooted in the original hippie ideals of living in harmony with nature. These communities often use renewable energy, practice organic farming, and embrace off the grid living. Neo hippie and countercultural movements. Festivals. The hippie spirit lives on in the festivals like Burning Man, Rainbow Gatherings, and Oregon County Country Fair. These gatherings attract a mix of people who resonate with the free-spirited countercultural ideals of the 1960s, focusing on creativity, community, and self-expression in alternative lifestyles. Music and arts. The music and arts that fueled the 1960s hippie movement continue to inspire newer generation. Modern genres like psychedelic rock, indie folk, and electronic music have taken on aspects of the hippie culture. Music festivals like Coachella and Glastonbury have retained some of the communal vibes of the earlier era. Influence on social movements. Environmentalism. The environmental consciousness of the hippie movement laid the groundwork for modern ecological movements. Many environmental groups, such as Greenpeace, Earth First, were directly influenced by the activism of the 1960s and 70s. Climate change activism today, especially among younger generation, reflects some of the same values. Alternate to health and wellness. The hippie movement's embrace of the natural and holistic health practice has left lasting impression or impact on the modern wellness culture. Practices like yoga, meditation, vegetarianism, organic food are considered fringe ideas associated with the hippie movement have become mainstream today. Social justice movements. Many of the civil rights, anti-war, and feminist movements of the 1960s continue to inspire modern social justice campaigns. The legacy of activism, free speech, and non-violent protest from the hippie era resonates in contemporary movements like Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights advocacy. Mainstream influence and commercialization. Mainstream appeal. Many aspects of the hippie culture, such as bohemian fashion, organic food, mindfulness practices, have been absorbed into mainstream culture. However, some argue that this mainstreaming has diluted the original radical and countercultural aspects of the movement. New Age spirituality. The hippie movement's exploration of the Eastern philosophies and alternative spirituality has grown into the broader New Age movement, which continues to thrive in various forms. Practices such as crystal healing, astrology, and spiritual retreats remain popular. Then there is generational shifts and aging communities, aging hippies. Many of the original participants in the 1960s hippie movement are now in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. Some have settled in more conventional lifestyles, while others have maintained their countercultural ideals into old age. Communities like the original communes have adapted to support aging members while still promoting the communal and sustainable lifestyle. Younger generations. Younger generations may not identify as hippies in the traditional sense, but many millennials and Gen Z individuals embrace the aspects of hippie ethos, and particularly around sustainability, mindfulness, and social justice. Urban communes and co-living, modern co-living spaces. In urban livings,
Modern what?
modern co-living spaces.
Where they live without being married, something like that.
In urban settings, the idea of communal living has re-emerged in the form of co-living spaces where people share resources, live more sustainably, and foster community. These spaces, though not directly descended from the hippie movement, share similar ideals of cooperation and intentional living. Challenges and evolution. Economic pressures. Many of the communes and alternative communities that have started in the 1960s have
failed.
Faced financial difficulties over years, especially with the rising land prices and economic challenges. Some have had to adapt or evolve their models to remain viable. Adaptation to technology. While the original hippies rejected much of the mainstream technology and consumerism, modern day offshores often embrace technology to promote sustainability and alternative living, such as through solar energy, permaculture, and internet connected networks for intentional communities. So in conclusion, the hippie communities of the 1960s have not disappeared, but have evolved and taken on new forms. While the large-scale countercultural revolution of the 1960s is no longer visible, the legacy of these movements can be seen in today's environmentalism, alternate living communities, and social justice activism and wellness culture. Many ideals from the hippie era, such as simplicity, ecological consciousness, and spiritual exploration, remain relevant today, albeit in more nuanced and modernized ways.
It failed.
Hmm.
The whole hippie culture failed. Yeah. No, why did it fail? Because they were willing to give up everything except sex. That's why I feel mainly. They gave up, bathing. They gave up getting a job. They gave up shaving. They gave up so many things, but they couldn't give up illicit sex. So for the most part, those hippie uh, let's say,
Communes.
huh?
Hippie communes.
Communes, yeah, they failed. Most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, anything that based on sense gratification is not going to succeed. It'll last for some time and then it'll just fall apart. Like there was this one group of hippies that refused to have shoes. They would always walk barefoot all over the place.
Mm.
Some of those people used to come to our temples, and like our temple in Berkeley, California. And they would come and they would stay and they would do seva. But they had real long hair, the men and the women, and uh, they lived communally. They sleep together at night, and they would get engaged in service. Right? They would come and stay in the temple or just outside of the temple for like a week or two and do service, clean things up, and so forth. And they liked kirtan and so forth. But eventually they started to break apart. It happened for some years, and then it began to disintegrate. There
So
would be
they like the freedom part of it, I mean, to explore and like music and all. Obviously, they like, but
yeah.
then they don't like the structure.
Well, yeah. Uh, there was like free sex going on for the most part, and eventually, you know, it became harder for them to earn a living. They would usually they were like mobile. They'd be going to different festivals that were going on around the country, and they would travel around, and and then they would panhandle. They'd go out and beg. Sometimes they would work also, but it sort of disintegrated, sort of broke down over time. There are still some people like that, but not as much as before. They became what you would call it integrated into the normal society after some time, rather than having these type of the lifestyle of traveling around, not really working, and smoking marijuana, having a free sex, and so forth. Um, there were some what you would call fanatical societies of hippies where you couldn't deny sex. If someone wanted to have sex, people had to live in the commune. They had to engage in sex. You couldn't say no. If you said no, then you'd be ostracized. Anyway, all those things failed over time, and the hippies more or less became, part of the straight society. Yeah. You see, you can speculate. You can start different types of societies. I mean, this has been going on since the beginning of time. There's different types of societies with different types of rules, and they usually fail over time. And there was this one group, though, Lanza, I forget now. Lanza something. Look at that Lanza, Lanza, Lanza something society. They were very active at one time. I don't hear about them anymore. They completely dropped out of mainstream society, had their own communes. You see that? Lanza, something like that, yeah. Hmm.
Lanza represents a distinct one rooted in spiritual, non-violent community living.
Okay, read it out loud.
The term Lanza society refers to different things, but two significant references are related to Lanza del Vasto.
Yeah, that's it.
And the community of the Ark. Lanza del Vasto was an Italian philosopher, poet, and follower of Gandhi principles of nonviolence. He founded the community of Ark, which promotes simple living and nonviolence through communal living and spiritual practices.
Right.
The community, influenced by Gandhian philosophy, practiced peaceful protest and self-sufficiency. They were involved in non-violent campaigns such as the occupation of the nuclear power facility in France in 1958. The community still exists, though it functions more as a spiritual retreat, following the daily rhythm of prayer, work, and festivals.
Right.
Then there is another one, I think it's a different one. This refers to a global network of fan clubs dedicated to preserving the legacy of Mario Lanza, a famous Italian-American tenor and actor. Yeah, that's a different one. I think it's probably the first one.
Yeah, in our temple in Berkeley, where I was, these different groups sometimes would come and just, you know, do seva in the temple for about a week or two. Clean things and fix things and like that. But they were always on the move though. They wouldn't stay more than maybe 2 weeks. And then they would go somewhere else. And they would all sleep together. And they were nomadic, they wouldn't stay in one place. And they'd be going to a lot of festivals. Um, but that broke down also over time. It wasn't like Krishna consciousness, which is based on, steady devotional service. They were nomadic. They'd be moving all the time in vans all over the country and going basically from festival to festival or commune to commune. It wasn't a sustainable model for living. But they, most of the time they were really nice people. They would do seva. That was their thing. They would come to the temple and clean things up, and oftentimes they were always they didn't wear shoes or anything. They'd walk around barefoot.
Were they like some sort of devotee, or just in general they are going everywhere in different temples?
They were not really devotees, but they were, trying to act in the mode of goodness.
Mm.
And they had their own, culture. They were young kids that a lot of times they would walk barefoot everywhere. They didn't wear shoes. Yeah. And they lived together, they'd sleep together. And, there was not strange things, but there were things like this going on, counterculture things. But they didn't last. They didn't, maybe they were together for like 5 years or 6 years, something. And then eventually it would break down. They tried to practice celibacy, and then that would break down also. So, okay, so I think we'll stop there.
Yep.
So what was it? Lanza del something.
Lanza del Vasto.
Yeah, Lanza del Vasto. Yeah, he started these different communes where they practiced, good things. They were not evil. They were trying to live, off the grid in little communities.
So the question by Sanmika Mataji is it because they don't have a higher purpose that the systems do not sustain these ideas?
Most of I'm not going to say they all failed. They're still going on some places, but they wanted to have an off the grid type of life, and live, sustainable life, natural life, and there was, they were willing to give up a lot of things, but they never really gave up illicit sex. At least that's what it looked like. And when you have that, then gradually a society like that breaks down, because children are going to be born, right?
Mm.
And then
Who will take care of them?
who's going to take care of them? Yeah, exactly. They break
That's
down.
where the societies break down.
Yeah, like you're going to have to educate
You have
the
to have the
children.
family as a unit because
Right. In some of those groups, the children belong to everybody. So it was confusing also for kids. Okay, thank you very much. So that's the end of the hippie culture. It broke down after time. It was not sustainable. A lot of the hippies became straight after time. There's still hippies, but a lot of them just became straight, put on suits and ties and started getting jobs and raising families.
yeah. Any other questions or comments? Happy Radhashtami.
Today. Yeah. Very good.
We'll meet in the evening. In the temple. Hare
I
Krishna.
was fasting until noon. Right?
Yes, and fast until noon.
Okay. Good.
Hare Krishna.
All good.